it's normal for Christians to call you names if you say something that's outside of what they learned from the scriptures, from the church. Yet, these reviewers are Christians, and they gave these awards to this book, and the whole book is outside of the Bible, of what they teach at the church. So, one of the claims that's important for us to understand, especially for the Americans today, is this claim that God did replace the land that was once promised to Israel, and that land is American land. And this is the last two episodes, and the next two episodes we'll be discussing these the scientific evidence and the evidence that straight out of the Bible that everybody missed. But we're going to discuss part of that today.
Welcome to the Magnificence of the Three, where we dive into real-life journeys and breakthroughs, blending science, spirituality, and personal growth. This is where we unlock fear-limiting beliefs and lock in beliefs of expansion and creation through empowering conversations that challenge conventional seeking and thinking. So I'm here with my brother from another timeout, Tamua. My name is Jason Ford. I am an author, a speaker, and a conscious communications coach. Timeout. Let's kick it off with a prayer, buddy.
Thank you. Good morning. Let's start this show with a short prayer. Father in heaven, thank you for another beautiful day. Thank you for adding another day to our lives. Thank you for taking care of our families and friends. Thank you for walking with us each and every day. And thank you most of all for choosing us to be your servants, to bring your word out to the community. Thank you again for everything that you've done for us. I ask for your spirit to be with us today during this show, to explore and explain the meaning of your stories that has not been interpreted before, like we're proceeding with the message you've given us. Thank you again for blessing us all these things in your name. Amen.
Amen. Well, time out. We always say we're about Godfidence, not religion. We're not about separation. We're about unification. So today we're going to continue on with some more of your interpretation of your claims in your book, The Magnificence of the Three, which is the book you wrote over a 10-year period after doing 27 years in prison, which is an outstanding story the audience can hear in previous episodes. Both of us kind of, by no coincidence, met and both wanted to do a podcast, both of us authors. And here we are on the 11th show. And I know today you wanted to talk a little bit more about what you cover in the book, and you wanted to start with Mount Sinai. But before we get into the material, let's do a quick recap of what we've covered. Essentially, the material in your book covers the structure of the atom and a lot of things in the Bible happening in threes. And when I say interpretation, this is all perspective. So you can read the book with a literal translation of it, or you can go into more of the allegorical type approach, which would be more of you've come from the standpoint of brain development or conscious awareness. So what did you want to add as far as the atom goes before we get started? Because I think it's always good to go through your structure of the atom, the structure of creation, the necessity of good and evil, and duality. So let's touch on the atom first, and we'll segue into the material for today.
I think the most important thing for the community to explore and think about is that I think this is probably the most I can't say because it may sound like I'm bragging about it, but it has to be a monumental discovery. You know, I was thinking about it last night that what can the discovery of the atom in the Bible? Is there any other thing that you can of how important it is? Any other discovery in the past? I mean, we have the DNA discovery, and dissecting DNA is important for us, but I think this is much more important because nobody really knew about the atom until it was confirmed by Einstein in 1905. But finding it in the Bible and finding out that everything in the universe is made from it, now that's monumental, you know. So I was thinking about that last night, that we need people to review this book. We need the intellectuals to review this book. So far, the reviewers have given it 9 awards so far, and we were discussing. We were talking about it in a car, and we know it's normal for Christians to call you names if you say something that's outside of what they learned from the scriptures from the church. Yet these reviewers are Christians, and they gave these awards to this book, and the whole book is outside of the Bible, of what they teach at the church. So one of the claims that's important for us to understand, especially for the Americans today, is that this claim that God did replace the land that was once promised to Israel, and that land is American land. And this is the last two episodes, and the next two episodes we'll be discussing these the scientific evidence and the evidence that straight out of the Bible that everybody missed. But we're going to discuss part of that today. So, but that's the most important thing about I think today about this discovery of the atom in the Bible is it's bigger than we can. I don't have the the words to explain how big this thing is. You know, if you sit back and think about it properly, you know, discovery of the atom in the Bible is big.
And you talked about with the atom, the structure being, you call it in the book, the neutron being the God particle. Some argue that the photon is the God particle. Either way, you have the structure where the neutron, which would be an unbiased neutral charge, and then you have the proton, which could represent man itself, and then you have the electron, which could represent evil. And all of that has to exist to hold the structure together. I know you talked about like desires, and desires being generated as you have to have the desire to forgive somebody. You have to have the desire to love somebody, to hate somebody, to have remorse. Right. And I think that was a great way to kind of exemplify the unbiased neutron by nature, which is if it's a neutral charge, our emotions play a big part in our intent in this world and how to create reality. And we'll talk a lot more as time goes on about some of the basics of quantum and how we figured through all sorts of different studies that our thought is an actual energy and mirrors back the effects, and it's undeniable. And I'll talk about some of that maybe towards the end on some experiments that I've been reading up on a little bit more. But the structure of the atom is really kind of the foundation that you started with the book, and then you go into the development of the brain, the reptilian brain, and then social brain hypothesis, stuff that's crazy that you even came up with because you didn't really have a scientific background, you didn't have a biblical background, really spiritual background, but you had mentioned and talk about, you know, going into this infinite intelligence and having the ability to tap into it, maybe like Einstein did with the atom, maybe like Nikola Tesla did with some of the inventions and things that he came up with, is this ability to go in. And when you were seeking it and you asked for it, you said you basically got the information, and over that 10-year period wrote the book. So now you had mentioned we're going to talk about the land. So what can the audience get out of today, like as a preface, as far as what we're going to cover and how to maybe interpret what is said in the Old Testament and the New Testament about the Holy Land of Israel, and how that it kind of translates into what is happening today, or maybe what it was prophesizing as far as the events of today?
For Christians, you know, it's really simple. Jesus doesn't care about any of that stuff. As a matter of fact, you know, right before Jesus went back, you know, in the book of Acts, the disciple asked him, "Are you going to restore the kingdom of Israel?" Jesus said, "You know what Jesus said? You mind your own business. That's not your business. That's God's business. It's in His own time." And then I discussed that further in the book, that this is one of the markers that was placed there in the Bible as in the preparation for the reappointment, the reassignment of a new promised land for the Gentiles. So this is really, really important for the Christians today, because your support for the killing of these, remember, Abraham had two sons. Ishmael, which they call, whose descendants are the Arabs, and Isaac, whose descendants are Israelites. These are two sons of Abraham, and in the records, as we discussed last week, when God promised Abraham the land, God was specific: to your descendants I will give this land. And Abraham ended up having, God promised this before Abraham had sons and after Abraham had sons. To your descendants I give this land. So, and then Abraham ended up having two sons, and for some reason, the Christians overlook this stuff. And we've been one of my beef with the church today is that the interpretation of the Bible was done. We're following the same interpretation from like almost 2,000 years ago, and we know the church history with the church has always been violent. And today we continue that practice today. So now we're teaching new kids, young kids, planning information that it's okay to kill these people in Jesus' name. That's not what Jesus is about. That's not what Jesus taught in the Bible. And we keep feeding these people, our kids, the young generation, this information, and this information is wrong. So we're going to discuss a little bit more why it's a lot more dangerous for us today in the next two shows regarding the land.
And that's the challenge I think that people have with religion in general. And this isn't a bash on religion. I'm an unbiased party here, but I think it's fairly evident that religion has caused a massive amount of separation in this world. And when you're talking about, Jesus preaching "love thy neighbor," and then you see what's going on in the Middle East. And then I was asking you last night, I'm like, hey, what sort of material can I look up here that there's any sort of evidence that this support for Israel and going in, and this isn't political. This is just facts of what's going on. You said, well, go look and see how much money that the U.S. has been giving Israel. I looked since 1946, it's like $300 billion, inflation adjusted, that has gone to Israel, which is almost at least twice what the next country has gotten from the U.S., which was, I believe, Egypt. So there's obviously support going into the quote unquote Holy Land, yet it's just a continuation of killing and a vengeance of going back and forth of a nonstop cycle of violence.
Yeah, that's what's important for them is that you ask the atheists out here and people that don't believe in the Bible, that don't believe God, that don't follow God, and they'll tell you that stuff is evil. Yet the Christians will say, we're doing God's work. Jesus didn't say none of that. Jesus says specific about the land, that's none of your business. This is God's work. Let him do his thing, but then they decided in 1946 to send the Jews from Europe, send them back into the land that, God didn't do that. Man did that, so those are little things, but I can't.
You could go on and on though,
because I'm they're not doing Jesus any favor. They're not doing, the church is closing. This is one of the things I did last year was go to churches, find out how bad it is. And my God, it's like 2 out of 5 churches has kids. The other 3, all adults, all people 50 and older, dying. So all the churches are dying because of that. I believe because of this, this kind of stuff. Because kids see evil and they automatically know what evil is. You don't have to teach them. Killing people, dropping bombs on children. Oh man, that's awful.
Well, it's just a hypocrisy. It's kind of like the younger generation. You're seeing a lot of the millennials and that are not getting married because when you see a divorce rate that's at like 55% or something ridiculous, it's like, well, why would I get married if it's going to end in divorce? It's the same thing with the church. You see this hypocrisy over generation, and it's like, wait a minute, what's going on here? So I know that you wanted to talk about rehash what happened on Mount Sinai, and I wanted to mention this because it kind of tied into your book. Is this morning I went in and I listened to the Sermon on the Mount again. I haven't heard it for a long time, and it went back to and hinted to your claims of brain development in the Bible, because you talk a lot about there's the number 3 a lot in the Bible. You also get left and right, east and west, which is if you're doing kind of more looking this in parable form. You may look at maybe left and right and east and west is left brain, right brain. Left brain being the more analytical, right brain being more the creative, loving side of things. And even on the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus says, when you're supplying for the needy, do not let the left hand see what the right hand is doing. Almost like, hey, if you're going to do it out of love, don't expect anything back. Don't get analytical about it. And go, hey, I expect that back from you. I'm doing you a favor. So you see that balance over and over. And you talk about opposites attract in the Bible with the proton and the electron. So it's interesting how when you look at this, like anything else in life, from a different perspective, we talked about on an earlier episode, when you look at when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. And when you look at the Bible from a different perspective and don't take it literal, all of a sudden it's like, oh, I think I see what's going on here. We're talking about evolution of consciousness, evolution of human behavior.
Yeah, that's one of the questions the atheists ask. They always make fun of God with the Christians. Explain to me why God of the Old Testament is different from the God of the New Testament. So I've explained that in the book. This is a depiction of the evolution of the brain. Our behavior here in the past was represented by how God behaved. This is who we were. Jesus and the Son in the New Testament, this is how our brain is supposed to be. In the Old Testament, you're supposed to, a tooth for a tooth, the law, call it the law of Moses, tooth for a tooth, eye for an eye, vengeance. This was established in the Old Testament. That's how we were supposed to be, because this is the early stages of brain development. And then as we mature, we end up with Jesus. This is where we're supposed to be. This is our brain was supposed to evolve to. How our brain was designed to evolve to is how Jesus reacted. So you forgive even your enemies, and in the end, you give up your life for everyone, including your enemies. So this is evolution, how the brain was designed to evolve to where we're supposed to be, to behave just like Jesus. So today, the Christians always when it comes to killing, they always point to the Mosaic laws, and then the same people will tell you, oh no, the old laws only apply to the Old Testament only apply to Israel with the New Testament. But these same people, when it comes to killing killing people in the name of God, they will use the laws of Moses. Oh yeah, it's allowed in the Old Testament.
Well, and you and I have talked about this a lot too, where we both agree that, I wasn't a religious person growing up. I wasn't spiritual at all until I had an experience. We both had a similar experience. And what I found was no matter how much I prayed and meditated on this, is that I found that the silence was the best way to reach any sort of God, at least that I could find. But if you talk about God within the church, even though it's all over in the New Testament, about the God being within you, the kingdom within, you tend to get shunned like, oh, that's a bunch of New Age BS. And it's like, well, wait a minute here. How come we're skipping over these scriptures, yet you, out of convenience, focused on only the ones that I tend to hear over and over in the church? Which I think that's a generational thing. So what are your stands on God within us versus kind of what you hear within the church?
Well, the church always, they empower themselves by separating us from God. The Bible says that we were created in the image of God, and that image was the image of good and evil. And that's what I explained, that this was the image, this was the marker to tell us that we were created from the atom. That's why we don't look alike, because we were created from the image of God, but that image is the atom. And that atom has both positive and negative particles, which in translation, spiritually, biblically, it's good and evil. So, but what now that I have the evidence to show that God is a neutron, the particle of the atom. This is God's particle. So now it explains why that image is why God is in us, because God rides in us. He is in us because we were made from trillions and trillions of atoms, and that's why he has the they call it omnipresence. What do they call it? The word?
Yeah, omnipresent within us.
That's why he has that presence, because he's in the atoms, and everything in the universe is made from this stuff.
Even the air.
That's
why the omnipresence.
What we're breathing, even that.
Well, that was a rhetorical question because I knew what your answer would be, but you just validated exactly to my point. Was I think with religion, what we have had over millennia is that we are to look to some sort of an agent or a broker through the church in order to get us to God when it's within. That's not to take away from the community of the church and the community of finding the divine, but it has been used as a control mechanism, and that's fairly evident and is consistent with what's happening today.
Yeah, they set it up to where, so now we have to go through somebody. To get to God, we have to go through somebody. So now people are going to universities and come out and say, oh yeah, I'm a messenger of God. And then they start talking about stuff that say, oh no, we tell that God is in us. That's exactly what they would tell you. Oh no, that's not what the church teach. We can't go outside the gospel. So and that's why I explained earlier that I'm really shocked about these awards, because they are from Christians. Because my claims, It's outside of the Bible.
Well,
It's
perhaps
outside what they
Christians are
taught.
starting to see this, and that's why a lot of
I
them
made
are
it simple,
leaving and jumping around to different churches.
right?
So, all right. Well, for the sake of time, let's get over to the Mount Sinai. I know you wanted to talk about how he revealed the opposite attract nature of Israel. And when we say opposite attract, we're going back to the inherent structure of the atom with the proton and the electron. So, talk a little bit about what happened on Mount Sinai and your claims on God revealing opposite attract nature
Yeah.
of Israel in general.
Yeah, my claim is that because God had personally assigned Israel as his tribe, he also, because Israel was then also designed in God's image. That image is the God of good and evil, opposite attract. So the incident in Mount Sinai was while God was giving out was designing the Ten Commandments on the top of the mountain, underneath the mountain. One tribe of Israel was already creating a golden calf to worship, an idol. So this instance depicted the first instance of Israel as opposite attract. This was the message God was planning here, that Israel is always going to, because it was they were part of the fundamental design for our development as his people. He would design them as opposite attract. It has to be opposite attract.
So do you believe that God went into creation knowing, of course, this isn't something that you can prove or anybody can necessarily know, but do you believe that his creation was knowing that Israel was going to rebel with the idols and therefore kind of substantiate his opposite attract?
This is what the incident of Mount Sinai depicted. He already knew because that's the design of heaven and earth, opposite attract. It's always be a group of three. So Israel was designed the same way. Israel became, because they represented mankind, so it has to be designed as a fundamental element of the design. So it has to be in three. It has to be a God of Israel, and Israel is going to be two opposite attract, two sides. So Mount Sinai was the first one, was the first incident. So we discussed that last week, and this is just a short summary. So, and then what we discussed last week is a role the Ten Commandments play regarding the land. When God promised Abraham the land, Israel was supposed to take by force, take that land. People were already living on these lands. So God instructed Israel to take the lands, but you have to take it by force. It means you have to kill people. You have to kill everyone, steal their land. But then God issued the Ten Commandments. In the Ten Commandments, God forbade Israel from murdering people, from stealing from people, stealing neighbors' stuff. So there's a contradiction right off. For me as a kid, I say, this is a contradiction. What does this mean? This is one of the questions people always ask, one of the common questions. So, but as I explained in the book, the Ten Commandments is actually a perfect tool for brain expansion because based on a social brain hypothesis. The social brain hypothesis say that the bigger we got separated from animals because we decided to have bigger tribes, bigger families. So as the bigger the tribe got, our brains also got bigger. And so I explained in the book that the Ten Commandments is a perfect tool for expanding one's tribe because you have to, if you're given two choices, you live with a community that kills and steals from one another, or a community that love one another and share stuff and respect one another, don't go around stealing from neighbors, which community would you choose? A reasonable person is, it's reasonable to assume that you choose the people that won't steal from you. This is how God designed, this is the meaning of the Ten Commandments, how it was designed. It was designed to expand the tribe, and the bigger, and so hypothesis came later and say, the bigger the tribe, the bigger the brain. So
when you have the quote, God, or one law for Israel and one for the stranger amongst them, expand on that.
That was part of this law about strangers living with Israel. So God had instructed them that even for strangers, the strangers have one law. The same law that applies to you applies to them. You don't give them no other laws, but Israel didn't do that. The rabbis later on made up their own laws and say, this called they call him the Mosaic no Noahide laws. I think that's what they call it. The rabbis later on make these laws and say, yeah, this is for the Gentiles. But that's not what God said. God set up the rules. So today, our show today, we're going to discuss 6 subjects: the record of Israel's idol worshiping record, the how the continuation of Israel is opposite attract, the fulfillment of God's promises in Leviticus 26 regarding the land, and how they rebuilt Jerusalem and the temple, how the prophecies were fulfilled, and how when God returned as the Son and rejected and told the disciples that he wasn't going to restore the kingdom of Israel.
So I think you touched on it. Let's start with Israel's record of idol worshiping.
Okay, so we have those. So it started from Mount Sinai, and throughout the record, it is well known that throughout the record there's this idol worshiping side of Israel, that they could not get rid of idols. They were always, and this is consistent with with my claim that there's always a side of Israel that's going to worship idols. So bad that there is a record. There is a record of Israel sacrificing babies to this idol, sacrificing their children to this idol, burn them in the fire to sacrifice them to this idol. It's 2 Kings 17:17, 2 Chronicles 33 verse 6. Those are the only 2, but there are others. There are other scriptures.
So that, not to interrupt you, but that right there is a start of a violation of keeping the land.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. This is a violation of keeping the lands. We'll kill them. So now today, this is what my concern, why I wanted this show to get out, because today, this is a relationship. Let me explain a relationship between the Christians and Zionists. Today, there is this assumption, they teach this in church, that whatever support you give to Israel today, the Zionists today over that land, God's going to bless you for it. So they've been dropping bombs on these babies, on refugee camps, and there's babies. They're taking out babies every week out of the rubble, dead bodies. So, and then I start thinking, I can refer you all to this thing, to what they did, the Israelites did in idol burning their kids to worship idols. I interpret that today that this is because the Christians so idolize the Zionists that they think they're gonna get blessings for the killing and the murder of these kids, the killing of these kids. You see what I'm saying? And this is exactly what happened in the Old Testament. This is what God said.
History tends to repeat itself.
Now there's a history repeating itself, and it's taught by the church. The church is teaching this stuff.
Well, it's fairly evident with the money flow going from the U.S. over where the support is.
Yeah, there's a former one of Trump's buddy, the Indian woman, American Indian woman, who wrote her name on a bomb that this bomb is gonna most likely drop on a hospital where babies are dying in. And this is the kind of thing that these people don't believe in God, so they do this stuff. The American, I don't think she's a Christian because she's American, she's an Indian, so she doesn't understand this stuff. This is banned from the Bible. This is what God says. No, we don't do that. You don't do that kind of stuff. This is what this is one of the reasons why he kicked Israel off the land. Is stuff like that. So here, the continuation of samples that God recorded in the Bible about the opposite side of Israel continue. They have a history of always and they don't just violate. They weren't just killing their enemies. They also went against killing one another. So Israel ended up divided into 2 tribes. They were no longer one, but it's recorded in Samuel, in the book 2 Samuel 2:3 and 2 Samuel 3. They end up divided into 2 tribes, northern and the southern Israel. So they got into civil war. So this continuation of the pattern, God recorded this pattern, continuing of the opposite attract side of Israel. So this was the second time God revealed this side of Israel. So immediately after that, the promises of Leviticus 26 came into play. All right. The Assyrians, this is one of the things that that I mean, these are simple questions you ask, regarding these issues. So right after the Civil War, the Assyrians went in first and took the northern tribe of Israel off the land. Then the Ark of the Covenant was gone. The Ark of the Covenant, God did not tell Israel what he's going to do with the Ark. The prophets don't know what happened to it. They just took the Ark. They didn't tell nobody. So, and then the Babylonians went in and took the southern tribe, the other tribe of Israel, and burned Jerusalem to the ground. Now, these incidents here, you ask the question, why, if God loves all Israel so much, why didn't he interfere? Why didn't he interfere? Why didn't he, bring lightning and from the heavens and to defend Israel? And that's because the reason why, because he already said that promise in Leviticus 26. He said, once you worship idols and violate the commandments, you're off the land. The land's going to rest without you. So he kicked them off the land. Now, today, you can hear the Christians today say, "Oh, there's support for Israel. Oh, yeah, God, God support Israel. God's supposed to restore the land according to the prophets." So they cite these prophets from the Old Testament. There's prophets. Who was it? There's Isaiah, Jeremiah. There's a bunch of them. Promised to restore Jerusalem and rebuild the temple. What they don't teach the church was that these prophecies were done before the second, because they rebuilt the temple the second time and Jerusalem. So they don't teach the church that these prophets had prophesied this before the second temple was installed, was created, was constructed. So this is the second Jerusalem that Jesus was born into. So the temple was up.
So let's recap real quick. So just to be clear for the audience. So you're saying that it was already prophesied that Jerusalem was going to basically burn to the ground, and that happened twice. And as it was rebuilt, that's where Jesus came in.
No, after it was burned and Israel was taken off the land, then the prophets started prophesying that God's going to restore the kingdom of Israel. So when they get out, when Judah came off, when the Babylonians were defeated by the Persians. So the Persians, who today is Iran, which is very interesting. Today these Iranians that turned to Iranians of the modern world, is they released Israel from the enslavement by the Babylonians. So it's these guys that when they went back, they asked the Persians if they can rebuild Jerusalem. And the Persians say, the king of Persia, Darius, allowed them and say, yes, you can. So they rebuilt Jerusalem. So this was done after the prophecies were ready. After the prophets had prophesied the rebuilding. So the prophecies came true. It's almost like God listened to say, yeah, I'm going to show you that this is not what you want. This is what you want. You have plans. I have plans. So God gave them their plan. Their plan was to rebuild Jerusalem. So this was the second time it was rebuilt. So this is the Jerusalem that Jesus was born in. This is the second Jerusalem that was already rebuilt. So, but we know from the scriptures that right, they one of the disciples, they were going somewhere and they saw and they came by the temple, and one of the disciples said, "Hey, check out the temple. It's pretty nice." Jesus said, "Hey, none of that stuff is going to stand. I think his call was not a rock would be left on top of one another, meaning that the temple was going to be destroyed." So that was the first. That was the first incident of Jesus. So So the next time when Jesus was crucified, and when he showed up, when he rose again, he showed up and found the disciples. So the disciples asked him, can you restore the kingdom of Israel? And that's when this is in Acts 1, 6 to 7, I believe. So that's when Jesus said, it's not for you a call. It's in God's good time. So what he say, what it means to me is that Jesus said, that's not a plan. God has his own plan. You see what I'm saying? And that plan was already set in place from Leviticus 26. And it's consistent with what I'm saying, because Israel, the only difference between Israel and us was they were assigned a task as priests. The question is, who were they supposed to be priests to? To themselves or to the world? If they were supposed to be priests to the world, they cannot do that job stuck on a piece of land. And I mean, it's just simple logic. I mean, how are you gonna take God to the world if you're stuck on a piece of land? Today, both sides of Israel say that it's their God. Their relationship with God is their God. It's nobody else's God. It's their God. It belongs to them. Oh, we forgot to mention that part, because the continuation of this opposite attract side of Israel, it began from the Mount Sinai to the Civil War. Today, there's two sides of Israel today. Continues today. There's a Zionists who think that land belongs to them, and then there's a diaspora who say, no, we have no business going back to the land. We're supposed to wait for the Messiah, for our Messiah to take us back to restore the land to us. But the land was restored by white Christians from Europe. The European, the allies, they restore not God. So ever since then, there's been these problems, the violence of these problems. They just October 7th, that's just one incident. There have been many of them since the beginning of time, since the beginning, since 1948, 46 when they went back, 1948. But this is the continuation of that opposite side of Israel continues today. This is straight out of the Bible, because it has to be opposite attract, because they were designed that way. There's always an idol worship side of Israel. And today, the Zionists, the Zionists are over there killing people over a land, and that's prohibited by the Ten Commandments. That's directly prohibited by the Ten Commandments. This is why the Ten Commandments overrule the covenant. And we explained last week, the difference between a covenant and the Ten Commandments is that once God set conditions on keeping the land through the Ten Commandments, I mean, the Ten Commandments is Israel's constitution. The covenant is a contract. Once God set the conditions on keeping the land in Leviticus 26, the covenant became a contract, whereas the constitution, the Ten Commandments became the law or the constitution for Israel.
So let's segue into how does this now relate to what's happening now with the, I know you had a theory on the United States being the new, what is termed in the Bible, the land of milk and honey. So how does this all tie in?
Oh, it's beautiful. Next two episodes, we're going to lay out the evidence of the claims in the book. But it has to do with Einstein. It has to do with the recreation. As I explained in the book, the Ark of the Covenant was the first atom bomb. The atom bomb, the first atom bomb of the universe. That's what. So when we recreate the creation of the atom bomb here by the Americans was a recreation of the Ark. This is how beautiful God left the evidence for us to discover. And my claim in the book is the Americans could not recreate this bomb unless it was authorized, unless God allowed it. He cannot do it because the Ark of the Covenant was designed personally by the hand of God. So nobody can recreate it unless God approves of it. And this is what the fascinating thing is: the people that started this project were all Jews. We're all Abraham's descendants, because they were the one who created the ark in the Bible anyhow. So it has to be them. Can't be by anybody else. It has to come through them. This is why, because German scientists knew about how to split the atom first before anybody else. So that's what started the bomb. But they could not recreate it because they were not assigned to this project. They were assigned specifically to the American. And the reason why? Because God had replaced the old land of Israel with the new land. The Ark of the Covenant, or the atom bomb replaced the Ark of the Covenant. And this is why America was able to do it, because God had approved of this land as his new land of the new world.
You start looking at this stuff from this perspective, and you start wondering if it's if there's any coincidence to this. The fact that you have the atom, which if you're claiming that's the foundation of creation, but then the atom is also used for destruction, and we talked a little bit about that. So you have some opposite attract right there with creation and destruction, with the splitting of the atom.
Yeah, it's what God did was beautiful. How he marked the evidence that he was aware of the atom. And this is the Ark of the Covenant, was that piece of evidence, was that solid piece of evidence. Like, you can't dispute it, that God was aware of the atom, because how he planted the evidence, the destructive force of the Ark of the Covenant in the Bible ended up just the same as the destructive force it did here on earth. So the evidence fell out of the Bible and landed here on earth. And through the recreation of the Ark of the Covenant with the use of the bomb.
And you talk about in parable form how the Ark of the Covenant actually represented the atom, because when you go through the measurements of the Ark of the Covenant in the Bible, like you and I had covered on a previous episode, it's pretty much all space.
This is not recorded in the Bible. It's one of those beautiful things. But it's in the archives
That's a different archive of it. Yeah,
it's not recorded in the Bible. But what they found was that when they put the ark in the room, the Holy of the Holy, the Holy of the Holies was 20 cubits across. So when they put the Ark of the Covenant inside the room, they measure from one side of the ark to the wall, it was 10 cubits. And then from the other side of the wall was also 10
in a 20-cubit room, which tells you that there was nothing.
There's nothing in there. There's nothing inside. So it is one of those things that nobody. But now I figure, when I found that the Ark was a covenant, the Ark of the Covenant was designed of the atom, and then this makes sense why this measurement was done. This is not in the Bible. It's actually practically in the Jewish archives, in the Jewish records. So it's one of those pieces of evidence just fell out of nowhere and just fits right into the claims, supporting the claims that, because the atom is invisible, you can't see it. And this is one of the evidence how God planted the evidence that, in the room, there's this physical thing, and then you measure it from one side of the wall, it turns out the room is pretty much empty. There's nothing in it.
So let's back up now, because this is interesting, because I know that you could just keep trailing along with this. So based on what's going on in your head when you write this material and your take on it now. So with everything going on in the Middle East and the world in the condition it's in, based on all that information that kind of flowed through you, where do you see this going with Israel and Palestine and the United States? Which I'm not asking you to prophesize, but based on you've dug deep on this. I'm not qualified to talk about this. Where do you see it going from here?
Yeah, my concern is this. Because the land, once God assigned the land as a promised land, it also has to be in 3 lands. It has to be 3 lands. That's my concern. And since Jerusalem was only burned twice, there's going to be a third burning coming. There's another one coming.
That's what I was getting at. So you're saying that there's going to be a third because everything is coming 3s. And you believe that third possibly would be the states.
That's that's my concern, because my claim is that the American land is the second promised land that God had assigned, has designated for the Gentiles. But that's a problem, because Jerusalem was only burned twice. So there's a good possibility that we might be the second burning, the third one, because of this, because of my claim that God had reassigned the new promised land, the second promised land, and that's us. So that's my concern. And now.
And you say that, not to interrupt, but you say that because in the Bible, he says that it's essentially in control of the Gentiles at this point, right? Which means non-Jewish by definition.
Yeah, when Jesus came back, he
And
reassigned the
we've got a
task.
melting pot here.
Yeah, he reassigned the task of priest. When Jesus came back, when God came back as a son, he reassigned the task of priest to include
To
Gentiles.
include Gentiles,
He did no longer
which would be a majority of the
right of
U.S.
people that are not descendants of Abraham. The Gentiles are people that had no ties to Abraham. So we have no ties to Abraham. This is why how dangerous it is. The more because this is the meaning of belief by faith. Because we have no ties to Abraham. Abraham made God. Ismail, who is a Muslim, who is one of Abraham's son, who is descendants, ancestor of the Muslims, he made the angel, God's angel. So they have these memories. We do not. Our ancestors never met God. This is why Jesus taught in the Bible about emphasizing the by faith belief. You have to believe by faith, because by faith is how we Gentiles has to meet God. We have to believe that what the stories written in the book are true. Can I get my point?
Yeah.
We had to believe by faith that the stories are true, because we have no memories. We have no ties to Abraham, and Abraham had met God. The Jews and the Muslims, their ancestors met God, so they have memories. This is why it's dangerous for us. Why we should not be interfering with this stuff. This stuff is, we should not be killing people for, And here is the point that also applies to us. In Leviticus 26, this is what God told Israel, because the land never rested. This is why you're off the land. You stay off the land because the land never rested while you were on it.
Meaning there's always unrest with war.
This is what we are.
Yeah.
Since the Christians got here from Europe, this land never rested. Yeah. They never rested because there's always one violence. In the last 20 years, we see nothing but wars, and we are part of that. Part of these wars, this conflict with the Muslims has to do with this land. But but now that there's a reason why God did not interfere when pagans went into Israel and took Israel off the land 3 times. First the Assyrians, Babylonians, and then the Romans. The Romans, this happened in the New Testament. So God did not interfere with them because he had plans. He already had plans. That plans were laid out in Leviticus 26 and is consistent with the assignment of Israel as priests. They're supposed to get off the land, go out there and meet the word and spread the word about God, which they never did. And this is why I'm arguing the book. This is why God returned and reassigned the job, because Israel never understood that task, which was and today they still don't understand that task, because today they
was to go out to be priest to the world.
No, not to violate the commandments.
Or violate the commandments.
Yeah. Today they're still violating the commandments. They're killing these people over land that God kicked them off. They say stay off that land, because the land never rested while you were on it. This is what I'm saying today. That since they went back, now that land also applied that phrase that God sent as God added in Leviticus 26 still applies today. The land never rested since 1948, since they went back. Never rested. It's the same thing with American lands. This is why I'm worried about it. Is we as Gentiles, maybe we have no business interfering with this stuff. We're Gentiles. We're the third leg to this relationship. This relationship of 3. This is a relationship of 3. There's God, and there's three tribes that worship Him. There's the Christians, the Muslims, and Israel.
And I didn't want to get ahead of you, but I know that's what you wanted to cover on the next episode, and we're coming up on time. So essentially, a summary of the next episode is you're saying that now that Jesus made known that he was not going to restore the kingdom of Israel, you wanted to go through how the evidence to prove that God did replace the land once promised to Israel with another one for the Gentiles. This land became known as the American land. So that's just kind of a setup for what you wanted to talk about on the next episode.
Yes.
All right.
That would be what we're going to, 2 more episodes, and we're going to lay out how the foundation of the claims of how the evidence that God left had landed here on earth, of how he planned on replacing the land. So
Okay, good. All right. Well, you can, if you want to read the whole book, Magnificence of the Three, you can buy it on Amazon. Where else is it at?
Walmart is now, and then pretty much in every bookstores, Barnes and Nobles, and it's sold actually in Europe and in Asia. I've seen.
Yeah, very, very interesting read and a different perspective. Because I know a lot of people have had questions on what's because there's got to be something to the Bible, and what is it about this text that that is so interesting and has essentially formed a foundation for the world in general. So we'll wrap it up there, and you like to take us out in prayer timeout. So go
Yes,
ahead.
just for close out is for us, we're responsible. We have a job to bring peace to the world. We grew up. I'm 60 years old. Ever since I grew up, there's never been any peace, and it always has to do with religion is always in the background of it. It's our responsibility to bring peace to the world. And what we're doing today, what the church. I just seen somebody preaching that involving the church should involve politics because we're supposed to be soldiers for God. This is the kind of stuff that we never rested because of this. So thank you for listening. So we close out with a short prayer. Thank you, our Father in heaven, for your presence here today. Thank you for your spirit being with us today. Continue to ask for your blessings for this nation, our families, our friends, and loved ones, and keep everything safe. And we also pray for the Palestinians that those babies stuck in under the rubble to bless them, bless their families, and as well as also the Zionists and those in Israel who are against this war. Thank you for your blessings for all of us. We ask all these things in your name. Amen.
Amen. Magnificence of the Three. Thanks for joining us. When you serve others, you serve yourself. See you next time.